I want to talk about BritCits this morning. This is basically, it's a charity organisation that deals with the rights of immigration to the UK, defending the rights of international families and documenting their plight of divided families. It's a charity organisation. But there's a case relating to, it's in the Supreme Court today, which is hoping to actually highlight some of the plights of families. Now, the first thing I want to say, this is about the 18,600 rule today. The 18,600 rule is basically you need a minimum of £18,600 to bring your partner to the UK, and then if you have another child, if you have your first child, it's 22,400 instead of 18,600, and then another 2,400 per child after that. That's your income per year, by the way. So if you're coming in from overseas and don't get a pension or something that would actually meet that 18,600 threshold, you wouldn't actually qualify. For example, if I was coming in from the Philippines and I've lived in the Philippines for 7 years and I have no income in the UK, I do not qualify. They want payslips in the UK or can actually show employment overseas and all that sort of stuff, but obviously I'm self-employed most of the time. So there's a few reasons this is becoming an issue today, because they're looking at making some of the factors better known to try and deal with it. Because the first thing is, where did they get 18,600 from? It's not a real number, because the minimum income for a person to be earning in the UK is not 18,600. But I'm sort of jumping the gun here. Let's get down to some of the information. Unfairness in the application rules. The first thing is mistakes have been made by caseworkers. These are things that are going to be highlighted today. Mistakes by care workers from the sheer complexity of the rules. I think they're being over nice with that, because I know myself, a lot of people just do not know what their job is. So I wouldn't say it's a sheer complexity. I just think they don't know what they're doing. Probably a lack of training, if anything. Next one is caseworkers have adopted a tick box approach, leading to inflexible and rigid decision making, even when the refusal lacks common sense. This is normally done from people above them. I know this because I work in the social system, and I've seen it done on other things. I haven't seen it done on this, but where they do not truly understand the information, they go by the word and will refuse to go flexible or introduce a bit of common sense, because they'll go, tick box exercise, because that way we're right. It doesn't matter if they're wrong, but on paper they're right, and that's why they do that. The Home Office decision maker has annualised the lowest income payslip to cover in the evaluation period, even where there's a dip in the results of illness and absences from work, often to visit the partner. So imagine, because they want 6 months payslips, so 1 to 5 months of the year on your payslips, you've been earning, I don't know, £3,000 a month, just say. That's too much, actually. Let's just say £2,000 a month, which is still quite high. And then on the 6th month, you're away for 2 weeks, so you're earning 1,000. But because you have one of these wonderful 0-hour contracts, you don't get your holiday pay and stuff, and there's other issues, so your income isn't really 2,000, it shows as 1,000. So for that period, you're looking, instead of having a £2,000 average, they take it as the £1,000, as far as I'm aware, for the 6 months. So you'd actually be under the threshold now, even though you're going to actually visit your wife and kids. But the decision maker refuses the application, and the sponsor must wait another 6 months before reapplying. The rules mandate the caseworkers are not allowed to exercise discretion with regards to their financial requirements, leading to an absurd refusal entirely in accordance with the rules where the income is less than £1 a week below the 18,600. Why that is relevant is because if you're a compulsive gambler and have nothing to show at the end of every week, but you earn £20,000 a year, you would still qualify. But if you earned $18,599, have paid off your mortgage, add a bit in savings every month, you wouldn't qualify, because the only figure they're interested in is 18,600. Cases have been seen where debt-free pensioners have been forced to sell property in order to show sufficient cash savings because the rules do not recognise the value of property. Funny that, when the biggest asset in the UK is property and where a lot of debt is hidden, if the pensioners, which very likely have, no debt in their property whatsoever, yet they're sitting on £300,000, why isn't it taken into account? Neither is any concessions made to people who have no accommodation costs. For example, if their mortgage has been paid off. There's another one. So 18.6 is okay to come up with a magic figure where you're paying rent and everything else. But what if you've got no mortgage? What if you live in a house where you're partially paying bills and stuff? Because this does happen. If you're still with your parents, for example, and your parents have a larger house and your brothers and sisters have moved out, the spare rooms, and they might actually want you to live there because your parents are getting older. Don't take any of that into account, where your income wouldn't actually be the equivalent of 18.6. It's probably the equivalent of nearly 24,000. This has resulted in some citizens, dual citizens, to renounce their British citizenship and rely on second EU citizenship, such as Irish, as the only way they could sponsor a partner. Agree. There's a lot of people who've done that. Some of the affected families will be attending the hearing over the 3 days to witness the arguments for themselves. Coming as far as Manchester and Penzance, the first day will consist of a meet-up outside the court between from 9 a.m. and where families graduate into the courtroom for the hearing to start at 10:30 a.m. If you're in the area, please go and support them, because this is destroying families. Even if it's just a pat on the back and saying, like, you know, we support you. Something as simple as that can make a big difference in somebody's day. Now I'm going to put some case studies forward now, which are on the BritCits Club, BritCits blog. But if you click the link at the bottom, you can go to the site and have a read yourself. First one is going to be Chris. Chris looks after his elderly parents in the UK. His parents' house has no mortgage. It's a rent-free house. He has no bills to pay because he looks after his parents. He also works as a security guard, which earns about £14,000 a year. He doesn't earn enough to actually bring his partner to the UK. So he's got a child, a baby, and his partner in the Philippines, but he cannot bring his partner to the UK, even though his parents are quite happy for him to move into that house, because obviously his elderly parents need looking after anyway. So they've got a location to go to, but his salary is only £14,000. But they haven't taken into account that he's got no expenses. They haven't taken into account that they haven't even factored in £100 a week for rent, because there is no expense. Let's have a quick read. The rules ignore third-party support, and the income threshold is designed to factor in £100 a week rent. There is no, so they factor in basically another 4,800 for rent in a year. So he would actually meet the criteria if they actually recognise that he lives in a rent-free house, but they don't. Lisa's, there's another case study, is a bit more complex because she's got a prohibited steps order in place by her ex-husband, so she can't take her kids abroad. Her Her new husband's Moroccan, but she lives in a part of England where 18600 is impossible to achieve. I agree with that because some of the areas like Penzance and stuff, the salaries are crap. I'll say it politely. But she's got no one to rely on, so she's stuck on welfare benefits. Hers is a bit more complicated because if she is responsible for the kids but got no way of working, she would never meet the criteria. But if her partner, her husband, come over and worked, then the burden of state would be reduced. But I don't know enough about her husband. But also, should she be penalised because her ex-partner is obviously not looking after his kids financially to the point that they're not a burden of state? I'll leave that one there because I can't really comment because I don't have enough information. But it's an interesting case because it highlights the fact that she have a right to a normal life if she's been penalised for having children from an ex-partner where a relationship broke down in some form. I can't comment. Let's go with Ben. Ben is a British citizen caught with different costs of living. Ben was living as a teacher in Indonesia and become a head of teacher, then a director of studies, and is a successful in a successful private language school in Indonesia. He has 2 children. He doesn't meet the income requirement according to the rules because his savings of £40,000 is insufficient because the rules ignore the first 16,000. So you're ignoring the first 16,000, which has no relevance whatsoever, because if you've got 16,000 in the bank, that would actually cover a partner's expense for the first year, because it's actually more than you would expect somebody to be earning as a working person in the UK. This is why these things are so nonsense relating to the 18.6, because 18.6 is more than a lot of people actually earn anyway. So if you've got, why would you ignore the first 16? I do not know what their idea on this is. Anyway, Ben's view is that surely someone who can make a successful life in a foreign country will be able to replicate that back home given familiarity and family support. The answer is yes. It's a similar situation to mine, where I went to the UK for a year because I needed the 6 months pay slips and bank statements to apply, but then I decided I didn't want to live in the UK, and that's why we were in Spain. But I just didn't like the UK, let's put it that way. And this sort of highlights some of the reasons why I wouldn't like the UK. I'll take the money, I'll work there, but I don't like the country. But anyway, Ben's Indonesian work visa is due to end, and he had to return to the UK. His oldest child, a daughter of 6, came to the UK with him as she has already enrolled in a local school. His wife will not be able to join them. His youngest child, a son of 2, will stay with the mother. Therefore, not only will the husband and wife be separated, but also brother and sister, mother and daughter, and father and son. To meet the criteria, you'd have to be working here 6 months. And like I said, I've been through that. I spent nearly a year from my own family, and I quite simply don't want to go to the UK. And there's a lot of people in this scenario that have gone to other countries and are thinking the same. But why is all these things an issue, and why is this case so important? The first thing is the income threshold shouldn't be any higher than the adult minimum wage for a 40-hour working week. How can you expect other people to be earning above it when you're saying that the minimum wage, etc., is acceptable for the average person in the United Kingdom? Because you're saying it's okay for them as a British national to be underpaid in that case. Shortfalls in earnings allowed to be met by savings even where it's below 16,000 for the nurse. Currently the first 16,000 of savings ignored. I agree with that, because 16,000 is still more than a lot of people are earning, over a year. So if you turn around and say, well, I'm earning X and there's another 16,000, which is enough for my partner's income if she sat on her backside and did nothing for the year, you've already put your case forward, because your cost of living, even if you jacked your job when you went back to the UK, you can still afford to live on your own savings for the first year. Allowing for credible and reliable evidence of undertaking of third-party support, which can, under the rules since 2012, has been disregarded. If my father decided to put some of his savings and his weekly pension towards my bringing my partner to the UK, why would that be ignored? It's my father's right and choice if he decided to do that. I'm not saying he would do that, but why would it be ignored if you're getting family support from their income? Because from my own view, as long as if you just, I would just want 18.6, and then you go, okay, well, my family's supporting, I've got an income, you said I need 18.6, I was only earning 14,000 or whatever, there's the rest of the money, it's paid for by my parents, etc. What is the problem? You know, I mean, some people could go, oh yeah, but what if they stop paying? Make it contractual then. If somebody agrees to it contractually, it's a contract. For a period of time, they have to agree to it. Simple as that. Less onerous requirements for self-employed. Self-employed get persecuted everywhere. It's one of the blights, because self-employed people have the ability to earn money their own way, but I don't see why they should be penalised because their incomes comes in a different way. I mean, you've got their accounts. What more do you need? Reduce the probationary period from 5 years. I agree with that as well, because I mean, I'm not being funny. I mean, for example, me and my wife, next year we've been married 10 years. Why would I need a 5-year probationary period? What are they expecting to change? And this is from a government that talks about family. It devalues people like no tomorrow. It's the party of cash. We want money, but also of lies, because this is in place not because it wants to reduce immigration. It's just to reduce immigration figures. What I mean is, if you take into account the EU immigration stuff, the horse has already bolted from the stables. There is no point trying to lock the door now. It's too late. Doing this is only penalising British citizens and their partners, because you have no control over the EU, which has nothing to do with British people whatsoever, but you're persecuting the Brits because you're crap at your job. And some people go, oh, it's Labour, it's Conservative. No, they're both guilty of this one, because they both pushed through on the EU. So they let people in by the thousands, by the million, from the EU, and now going, what do I do? Oh, we'll go after the Brits. Brits can form. Brits can take it. Brits will just bend over and take it, because they have to, because they have a different set of rules, because they're British. It's sad. It really is sad. It's a sad day for the UK. It's a sad day for the fact that the uncontrolled immigration across the whole of the EU, for the agreement the UK signed up to, wasn't thought out. Then blame the Brits for it. It's nothing more than that. But the figure fudging is really annoying, because the significance of British people and their non-EU spouse is irrelevant in the big picture. If all the people that are British and have a non-EU spouse didn't go to the UK, how much difference would it make? Virtually nothing. If they all did go to the UK, what difference would it make? Virtually nothing. What makes it important is news headlines, because you got that horrible woman Theresa May that's incompetent. I don't know what she did as a job. Has anybody actually seen her actually have a job before she became a politician? Because she's unfit for purpose. But the whole point is they push this as being something major. We've stopped immigration by doing this, but they haven't. In fact, all they're doing is brushing the major problems under the carpet and targeting the route that relates to British nationals. They have done nothing to stop the EU migration, which is where the problem is. And even then, they don't even take a value on that. They don't even look at what value EU citizens have brought to the United Kingdom. It's just it's a farce. It's all a complete farce. Because it's much easier to blame everything on migrants, immigrants and everything else than actually look at the state of the economy, which is the real problem here. But target the immigrants, target people with foreign wives, foreign husbands, etc., because it's much easier. Thanks for watching.